Okay, hi. I'm back. And look, let's address the elephant. Let's address the elephant in the room really quick. If you see a lot of these videos, because I'm trying to post every single day, that means for me at least, because I work and things like that, that when I do have free days, I will be batch filming. It just makes the most sense for me and for my schedule, and also for my peace of mind and for my sanity. So, if you see me in the same outfit on more than one occasion, um, a few times a week in these videos, no, you didn't. Mind your business. Let's get started. So, this is a topic that, is really very near and dear to my heart, that I care about a lot. Um, and I've made a video about this before, but when I made the video the first time, the audio was terrible. Everything was terrible. You could barely hear what I was saying. And this is such an important topic that I feel as though it's time to make another one that isn't all over the place this time. So, what I kind of want to talk about are the declining literacy rates in the US. Um, and, I've seen a lot of videos about teachers discussing how their students just cannot read, and they're not reading up to the standard of their grade level. And it's really disheartening. And instead of focusing on the children and even the teenagers in a lot of these instances, because there are a lot of moving parts in why this exists, I kind of want to focus in on an aspect that I haven't heard anybody speak on. And it's that 9 times out of 10, if your parents can't read, you won't be able to either. And this is something that I've experienced in my own personal life from people that I know who are functionally illiterate, barely functional, and illiterate. I'm talking they can't even fill out a job application on their own, okay, because they can't read. Um, and as a reader and as someone who has grown so much as a reader in the past 6 years since I began reading more and um, reading as a hobby, you know, I am someone who has always scored above and beyond in English, in literature, and comprehension. So this has never been an issue for me. I will also say I have always been poor. And I mention that because a lot of that has to do with your socioeconomic status. So it's not an inherent intellect thing so much as it is an opportunity, a connections, a wealth, a class thing. And that is a totally different conversation that I will have on this channel here soon. I'm actually reading about fascism currently and a lot of other socioeconomic systems in the world and in other countries. Um, because all of these things come together and they are interconnected and affect everyday people, but most importantly, poor people. So when I have the conversation about people being illiterate, I am no way talking down on anyone, but instead I'm trying to address the heart of the issue. And that is a lot of time class. Because when you get up in the different echelons of society and when you have wealth and when you have more resources, these gaps in intellect even out because that's the common denominator. This isn't a video to shit on anyone for lack of better term, but to kind of shed light on this topic in a way that I have not seen done as far as the media that I have been exposed to. So, the question that I ask is if you, as a parent, if you are not literate, then how would you expect your child to be literate? So, when I ask that question, I'm coming from the place of someone who worked in customer service, as I mentioned in a previous video. I spoke to hundreds of people weekly, upwards of 300 people weekly. And it's not even alarming when, a customer calls back and they're asking for clarity on a document. But also, what was even more alarming were the people who worked in the same kind of field adjacent to the one that I worked in, because I was a title clerk and then I became a customer service representative in a call center, you know, receiving calls daily, for people asking questions about their title and about that process, and for clarity on documents that they received, or requesting to have certain things done for their title. And so that would mean that I worked with a lot of title clerks, um, who worked at dealerships, who actually processed this title work. So let's say a customer is moving from Maryland to Virginia. Well, if they're leasing their vehicle or if they're financing their vehicle, we have to send their title to that new state, along with necessary paperwork, in order for that process to be made and for a Virginia title to be generated, essentially. And, we would send documents. And of course, essentially what we're telling this agency that the customer chose to have their title sent to is that they're allowed to make the change, but once they do, you have to put our lien back on the title. And you don't even want to know how many title clerks called us back, asking for additional documentation to say explicitly what the documentation we sent them said. Okay. And how many times I had to pause and mute my mic just to make sure I wasn't crazy and to read those documents. And the document said exactly what they were asking for. And I would unmute my mic and I would say, "Okay, so walk me through this. What do you need?" And they would explain to me exactly exactly what the document we sent to them was explaining and authorizing. And so some of that could be them not reading the document, okay? But my point is, this is your literal job. This is what you do for a living. So you'd think that you'd be reading the documents you receive in order to properly do your job and not waste your time and mine by calling me to affirm or to ask for something we already provided you, because there's nothing else that we could give to you. This is that letter that you're asking for. All you had to do was read it. And I say that because this literacy issue did not just come out of thin air. It's been a problem. When I'm speaking to people who are old enough to have children and they're not reading these documents, and I'm not even just talking about the lay person. I'm talking about the many people I spoke to whose job it was to read these documents day in and day out. And these were by no means documents typed up in legalese. Okay, these were the sort of documents that you get trained to read, that I got trained to read as a title clerk when I was one. So you should know what these terms mean. You should know how to generalize them. You should know how to summarize them. You do this every day. And so when customers have questions, you should be able to explain that to them because you should know it. You should have read the document and you should have understood what was on the document. And that wasn't happening. And I bring that up because it happened often enough for me to ask, how is this a thing? How is this a thing? And I have some stats up here on the screen somewhere of like 79% of people being actually literate, and other statistics that are listed up there. And it's really something that, when I see it, you know, it's I don't want to say it's frustrating, but it's upsetting because one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I'm going to kind of bring things to a close here because I just wanted to kind of get this off my chest, but one of my favorite books ever is Animal Farm by George Orwell. A lot of people talk a lot about 1984, but I've not seen enough people talking about Animal Farm and how important that book is, because it was really insidious how the pigs kept education from the rest of the animals on the farm so that they would continue to work them to death in some cases. Because the more you know, the more action you can take. I'm going to put up this quote from heavyweight boxer Vladimir Klitschko, and it goes something like this: the point of education is not just knowledge, but action. When you are uneducated, you are an easy target. And you are susceptible to being used, to being abused, without even knowing that's what's happening. Just like the animals in Animal Farm, you have a feeling in your gut, in your chest, that something is wrong. You just can't pinpoint what, because you don't have the words, you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge to pinpoint what it is. So you certainly don't have the knowledge on how to act, on what to do, on how to fix this. And reading is a very large part of that, because you are faced with this text and you have to decode it. You have to use your brain. You have to have patience. You have to literally school your attention span into compliance so that you can take in this information and you can decide for yourself from that information what you believe or what this means, and further how to act. And so this literacy issue is deeper than people choosing to read for fun. These are the people who are going out to work in our workforce. These are the people who are contributing to our society. These are the people who are building our society. And if they can't read, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our society? What does that mean for our country? So I'm going to leave you with that, and with the stats and with the quotes and everything. And I probably will broach this topic more as I think about it. But I wanted to keep this brief, and I kind of just wanted to bring this up and kind of just kind of share a different perspective, that this is a problem that has been brewing slowly for decades and is now coming to a head. And the only way to fix it is to get people reading again. So I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good evening. And most importantly, I hope you read a good book. And I'll see you when I see you.